Why the New Orleans Saints should stay away from pass rushers in round one of the NFL draft. Ladies and gentlemen, off the bench, Jacob Hester, T-Bob, or the backdrop. Now, I agree with this 100%. I think edge rushers is a overvalued position in the draft, very similar to how I view cornerbacks. And we're going to look at a little bit of data to back that up. Let's go ahead and listen to these two hombres, and we'll react along the way, shall we?
New Orleans Saints. Ross Jackson has an excellent piece up on LouisianaSports.net right now where he is talking about, instead of picks that these Saints should make at 9, picks that these Saints should avoid at 9. And, well, imagine this. It's 2 talented but not productive pass rushers that he highlights here, and that is Georgia defender Mikael Williams and Texas A&M pass rusher Shamar Stewart.
So I did a video of 3 players that I think the Saints should not pick. Shamar Stewart was one. The other 2 were cornerbacks. It was Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron. But I agree. Like, Shamar Stewart, athlete, no doubt, but we are not drafting for the Olympic long jump team. We are drafting to play defensive end in the NFL, something that Shamar Stewart has not done very well in his life.
And look, both of these guys are athletic freaks. Shamar Stewart especially took the combine and just
hit a perfect RAS score.
Dominated
10
it.
Out of
insane
10.
Height and weight, insane 40s, insane
broad jump.
Everything. Jumps, everything.
Yeah.
But 4.5 sacks in 3 years in college. Granted, Mikael Williams has been more productive, but 4.5 year 1, 4.5 year 2, 5 in year 3. And here's where it gets a bit odd, is that like Josh Allen, Danielle Hunter is the guy to highlight here that you can always point to if you want to make one of these picks, right? Because Danielle Hunter didn't get any sacks in college, but was that same physical freak, dominated combat, all that other stuff. And now he's made himself into literally one of the best pass rushers of all time in the NFL. But context matters. And that's where I think you cannot avoid. If you were a better team with a better track record of this, I would allow you to go get Mikael Williams or Shamar Stewart. But given your misses, and your misses specifically in trying to find that pass rusher, also with the added context, if you let Trey Hendrickson leave, guys.
You know, like, this kind of stuff just blows my mind. Because within the same paragraph, you say, because of your track record in drafting these players, but then you have to add the context that all of the people like Dennis Allen and the staff and whoever, like the system is all changed. So there's no correlation there. And then you say your track record in drafting these players, but then you point to maybe the best pass rusher in the NFL that you drafted. Now, yes, he's not playing for the Saints anymore, but you still do have to admit the Saints found him. So it's like, on one hand, you're saying, I have no faith in you to do this, which in itself doesn't make any sense because the decision makers are not there. As far as like the scheme, as far as like the defensive decision makers, I understand Mickey Loomis and the scouts are still there. And then you say, I have no faith in you to do this, but then you point to the guy that they best did it with. All right, so like that whole line of thinking has so many holes in it. Like it just doesn't mean anything. And it's crazy to not take a couple steps back and realize, like, oh, well, actually, they have proven they could find these players in Trey Hendrickson. But then you take another step back and say, well, I guess it really doesn't matter because it's a completely different defense. It's a completely different scheme. It's a completely different, idea of like what kind of players you want.
Guy who leads the NFL in sacks over the last couple of years. You had him. You drafted him. So given your record, you cannot take the risk of drafting a high potential pass rusher. And I don't care who's it, Mike Green from Marshall as well, small school. No, now he was very productive, but
like if you fill in the gaps of the sentence, it's we cannot trust you to find a pass rusher because you drafted Trey Hendrickson. It's like, well, wait a minute. That should be evidence that you can find a pass rusher late in the draft. But you drafted Peyton Turner. now it sounds like it's just a 50% hit rate, which kind of goes to the average, which, okay, now we're back to where it doesn't mean anything.
Small school, no. I don't want a pass rusher at 9. I don't want that the bottom line.
That's exactly where I was going to go, T-Bob. Look.
You know, like the pass rusher at 9 thing, I think there's 2 reasons why you wouldn't want one. The first reason is Chase Young, and the second reason is Carl Granderson. I think you're good. Like the same reason you don't want an offensive tackle at 9. You don't want to tackle at 9 because of Tulise Fuaga and Trevor Penning. Like, you're okay. You're all right there. You want someone at 9. First time the Saints have drafted at 9 since 2008. You want someone at 9 who's going to make an immediate impact on the field and is as close to a sure thing as you can possibly have. Now, we're 5 minutes into the video, so I'll show this already. I'll go ahead and show this. So there is something called a hit rate, and you can kind of look at the positional success of the hit rates. Now, this is not a perfect formula. So the way they do a hit rate is, in this example, they look at just snaps played. So if a team puts a drafted player on the field, they likely believe in his ability. This analysis focuses solely on offensive and defensive snaps, so no special teams, which, that's fine. Concern with picks from the first 3 days of the draft, as those are generally expected to contribute meaningfully on offense or defense. Correct. So like a 6th-round pick, 7th-round pick, they're not expected to meaningfully contribute to offense and defense. They probably will contribute on special teams, but, So to establish baselines, we calculated the average snap percentage for the top 32 players at each position league-wide. With 32 NFL teams, this serves as a proxy for the average number 1 player at each position. Okay, so again, that should make sense. You're looking at 32 teams, 32 players at each position. That gives you an average of the perceived number 1 player at that position for each team. Okay? All right, so if you look at the following table, outlines the snap baselines by position and aligns with expectations. Offensive linemen rarely leave the field, right? You don't see them rotate out, while pass rushers, tight ends, and running backs often share snaps. Even the starters, which, again, shouldn't surprise anybody. Naturally, we don't want to evaluate rookies against the top players at each position on every team, so we provide some leeway. A drafted player is considered a hit if his snap percentage over the first 4 seasons reaches at least 2/3 of the baseline for a full-time starter at his position. Again, that should make sense. A rookie's not necessarily always expected to get the number 1 amount of snaps, so they get that 4-year baseline to reach their potential. Okay? All right. So if you look at the draft success at various positions, this chart shows you that the later the draft selection happens, the lower the chance of hit rate, which not surprising, right? The later you're picking, the worse the player is perceived to be, the less expectations on the player, the less amount of snap share that they'll have, okay? So let's look at the following table showing the results for round 1 of the NFL draft. Tight end, 73.3% day 1 hit rate, which is plus 14.2% relative to pick expectation. Inside offensive line, safety, tackle. Now, at the bottom, edge rusher, which has 75 picks for a 49.3% of hit rate. So less than half have been hits for a minus 13.3% relative to pick expectation. Second worst, cornerback. Cornerback, 64 picks, 50%. Dead, just in the middle, 50-50 shot, minus 9.6% relative to pick expectation. All right? So this reveals a lot. It reveals behavior. Okay, so this reveals that teams are much more likely to take edge and cornerback over, say, tight end. It's also the number of prospects and whatnot. But across the board, there's a negative correlation between the draft capital spent on a position and its corresponding hit rate. For premium positions, such as edge rusher or wide receiver, teams appear more willing to take risks on high upside prospects, which is why they have the high number of picks. Even if those players come with a clear flaw, the potential value of hitting on a player at one of these spots often justifies the gamble. However, this approach also leads to teams moving on more quickly when those players fail to produce at a high level. In the case of edge rushers, another contributing factor to the lower hit rate is that teams will often select them based purely on talent or upside. Sound familiar? even without an immediate positional need, leading to fewer available snaps during their rookie contracts. This sounds incredibly familiar to what we're talking about with Shamar Stewart. It also should sound incredibly familiar with some of the defensive end prospects that the Saints have taken chances on. High risk, high developmental players. Okay? For positions like tight end, safety, and interior offensive line, the trend is reversed. Teams typically select players at these spots only when there's a clear need and if the prospect is viewed as a blue chip talent. Okay? We've talked about this. The two ways I'd like to judge prospects with a team is, do they have a clear linear path to play and a clear linear path to impact, like off the jump? Okay? Like, for example, a safety. If a safety doesn't have a clear route to play, like let's just say Tyrann Mathieu is there and Justin Reed is there, and then you factor in they're a safety, so how impactful are they going to be anyways? To me, takes them off the board. So like Emin Starks, like players like that in this year's draft, I take them off the board. All right. Tackle. Immediate line to play. Not really available for the Saints right now. You'd have to move Trevor Penning. You have to do all kind of stuff. And then, so that'll eliminates the tackles from the board. So on and so forth. Edge does that for me with the Saints because of Chase Young and Carl Granderson. It also does it because of this chart right here. It also shows you, like, it probably isn't best, or let's back it up a little bit. The immediate impact, if you look at this chart, it shows you the immediate impact is low because edge rushers usually get taken if they have some super high upside that needs to be developed, which lessens how impactful they are immediately. Okay? So that's something to look at, something to think about. Then they go on day 2, hit rate, halfbacks go up, or halfbacks are towards the top. Safeties, interior offensive line stay up. Okay? So that's something to think about. All right? So when you're talking about like edge and cornerback and stuff like that, which is what the Saints are being mocked to right now, they're being mocked to the Will Johnsons, the Jahdae Barons, they're being mocked the Shamar Stewarts, like the Mike Greens. It just doesn't really add up. And it's the easy mock, it's the easy thing to say, because there is high upside. It's like a who knows kind of thing. So you can just throw excrement at the wall and hope it sticks, right? But as those charts showed, a lot of the times it doesn't stick.
I'm not even saying that you don't need a pass rusher. I get it, because Cam Jordan's older, because Carl Granderson's older. I understand, and Isaiah Foskey didn't work out. I do understand that, but I still think you can get enough production from those players. You just signed Chase Young to a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, that's an edge rusher. How many resources do you plan on putting on the defensive line? Yeah. Brian Brzee, first-round pick. I mean, you traded for a defensive lineman here in this free agency cycle. You re-signed players on that position. You've spent enough time on the defensive line. You have got to go playmaker. You have to. Brandon Cooks, sure, it's a nice additional piece. But if you think signing Brandon Cooks is going to be the difference maker on offense, you were fooling yourself.
I don't think anybody thinks that.
He can be a piece of the puzzle. He's not going to finish the puzzle. You have to either go tight end, receiver, running back. You need some juice offensively with a weapon for a quarterback that cannot do it by himself. He needs all the help that you can give him.
I agree. I mean, I think now the Ted McMillan thing, it depends on how you view him, what your player grade is. Who do you, like, the wide receiver this class is so tricky because some people have Higgins as a number 1. Some people have Jalen Noel. Some people have Matthew Golden. Some people have McMillan. Some people, like, it's all over the place. Savion Williams, Jack Beck, like they're everywhere. So if you think, well, damn, we can get Mason Graham at 9, and then we can turn around and get name your receiver at pick 40 or in the 3rd round or whatever. Like, this is a curious case for wide receivers. If Ashton Genty is there, I think you absolutely sprint to the podium, take Ashton Genty. But Tyler Warren is another one where we saw on the chart, usually a pretty high hit rate. In today's NFL, tight end is really more of a pass catcher. We saw what Brock Bowers did last year. Tyler Warren is super versatile. There are question marks as far as like how you would utilize him with Juwan Johnson, who just got a fat contract. But I've talked about this before, but Juwan Johnson is more of the hybrid wide receiver where Tyler Warren, you're probably more comfortable playing on the line, probably playing more or attached to the line, probably playing more of that true tight end role. So I'm with Jacob here. The only way I would not go playmaker is if Warren goes, Genty goes, McMillan goes, and then you have a combo of like Jihad Campbell, Mason Graham. They're all out there. It's like, okay, maybe then you don't want to reach for Omarion Hampton or Colson Loveland or whoever you think is the next wide receiver. Take the best available at some needy positions like linebacker and interior defensive lineman.
I think the one defender I may be down for would be Mason Graham. But
now Mason Graham, the reason I say Mason Graham, I know we're talking about the defensive line, is that Mason Graham does fill a need and provide immediate impact at something we currently don't have, which is a run stopper in the middle of the field. Like we currently do not have that on the field. We have this like bevy of pass rushers. We have all these guys who are pseudo getting after the quarterback, even Brian Brzee, but we do not have someone at a high level who can stop the run. And Mason Graham can provide something in the pass rush too. So Mason Graham is a guy who super highly rated, probably best available at that point, also fills a need, also provides tremendous impact for what the Saints specifically are trying to do. So, and then the linebackers are perfect because of the 3-4, because of their versatility. Jalen Walker and Jihad Campbell can be moved around. They can play, they can be the outside linebacker or whatever on a 3-4, kind of get after the quarterback. You can move them around to the middle of the field. They can kind of do it all. So that's why I targeted those two as well. Just because Brandon Staley's trying to build this defense, you get a piece that can be moved around at a super high level player. And you talk about Demario Davis and Pete Werner. This wouldn't affect that. 61% of the NFL or nickel is run 61% of the time in the NFL, in the current NFL. If you look at like the 4-2-5 and the 3-3-5 nickel sets that Brandon Staley would run, and I know we're getting like super into the weeds here, but if you look at those two sets, then Campbell would slide perfectly in with Davis and Werner, so it's not like he would be fighting for playing time.
Again,
Mason Graham's worth the 9th overall pick, no doubt about it. Any draft, like he would be a top 10 pick. You can place him in any draft, doesn't matter, he's a top 10 pick. But again, you've traded for a player at that position. Brian Brzee was a first-round pick at that position. You've got so many resources tied into that position.
The Godchild thing doesn't really count because you're getting the pick back. So I don't think you could factor that in as far as like capital spent.
Do you think that adding a Mason Graham would be a game changer enough with what you have offensively? I do not.
Yeah, that's
if they are there. Yeah, if they are there, I would rather go with the offensive players we just listed. But there is a great chance Genty goes 6, Warren goes 7, McMillan goes a bunch of different spots he could go. So there's a great chance that they're not on the board. This draft, that's another reason it's so fascinating, is that it can break so many different ways. Genty could go at 6. He also could be there at 9. Right? McMillan could go at 4. He could also be there at 20. Like Shedeur Sanders could go 2, 3, or be there at 9, or he could go 21. And all of those different decision points take you in very different directions if you're the New Orleans Saints. So it's one of those drafts where you got to be ready to pivot hard at 9. You got to be ready if you're, I mean, that's really the question. Like the question is, what do you do if McMillan goes, Warren goes, but Genty is there, but Graham is there? Like you probably go Genty because of the upside, but all right, well, what if it's they're all gone except for Warren and Jihad Campbell? You probably go Warren. All right, but there's also a chance that they're all gone and you're in between Mike Green, Jihad Campbell, and the defensive backs. And then you're thinking, well, I don't really want Mike Green. I don't really want the defensive back, so I guess I'm going Jihad Campbell. Like this is or then what if they're all the people I listed are gone except for Mike Green, the defensive backs, and Shedeur Sanders? Then do you think, well, I have Shador so much higher on my board than I do Mike Green or Jahdae Barron or whoever. So then you go Shador, which I'm not saying it's the right pick, but I could see how you'd get there because of the way that this could break.
That's fair. I mean, that's completely fair. Maybe this is only a world in which like Genty, Warren, and McMillan are all off the board. Even though I don't know McMillan, I'm a little freaked out by that. Not like no.
There's a lot of people. So we have, Rhett, who came on here last week, but Rhett comes on with us every week for an hour and talks nothing but draft.
Yeah.
And he said it's freaked every team out.
Yeah. That's so crazy. And I know you may be sitting there and saying like, I mean, is that an overreaction? Like, what are you talking about? But that was it felt like a Project Veritas video. Like that was a very honest moment from McMillan. And I don't know that's something that you can just change.
That's something that the McMillan video, so we covered this on the channel, and a lot of people are like, brother, that's from 2023. And it's like, my man, it doesn't have to be from 4 days ago. Like, do you think that all of a sudden he just loves football, loves watching tape, loves doing this, and this? The problem with McMillan, I'll be very quick with this because I've covered it extensively. The problem with McMillan is that he's so reliant on being able to win these 50-50 balls and this contested catch rate and all of that being so high. One, you don't expect that to get much better because if you factor in like he's not really a student of the game, doesn't really love the game, so he's probably going to rely on what's got him to the show, which is not to worry about separation, just kind of win these 50-50 balls. Question is that going to work in the NFL? The answer is no. Okay, so all of a sudden McMillan turns into this like pseudo low volume slot kind of guy, like a George Pickens that doesn't play necessarily like this, but it's the same to me. It's a lot like George Pickens, where Pickens makes these big plays. He makes these like deep 50-50 balls, the twisting catches on the sidelines, like over a DB and all that stuff. Like, that's George Pickens, right? George Pickens isn't, okay, it's 3rd and 6. We need this guy to give me a dig route, slant route, boom, pick up the first down. He's going to get 12 catches on 14 targets or whatever. Like, he's not that guy. And George Pickens was, a 2nd-round pick. So, and George Pickens is fine. Like, he's good. And he's good for what the Steelers use him for. But he's not the 9th overall pick. And that's my thing with McMillan. I think McMillan, from how I see it, he is closer to the 20th pick. He is closer to an accoutrement in the wide receiver room. He's closer to, we've got this guy over here, we got this guy, and then we have McMillan, who is a highly volatile receiver who can make these crazy plays, but he can also get shut out pretty quick. That's how I see McMillan. I don't see him as Mike Evans. I see him as somewhere in between Evans, Pickens, players like that, right? So McMillan's good, but he's not 9th overall good. And I don't know if he's that kind of a receiver, which kind of speaks to the chart we just saw. McMillan's got a lot of upside. He's got a lot of downside. He's got a lot of risk. He could be a lot of different players. Teams are much more willing to take the risk on a wide receiver because if you do hit, and he is, name your receiver comp, he is that, then he's worth that 9th overall pick. Same reason Darius Hayward-Bay and people like that get drafted that high. They have a trait, they have something that's like, damn, if this just translates, and McMillan's got the body type and some highlight reel catches, but I don't know. A lot of questions there.
Can you learn to love it? Can you learn to want to watch it?
No.
Now, granted, there are guys who have been, like Arian Foster very famously, never really liked watching like football casually or anything.
Running back, you can get away with it a little bit more.
Willing to do what he needed to do in order to be successful, but
yeah. And Arian was a more of a 1st and 2nd down running back than he was a 3rd down. At the running back position, tape is a 3rd down situation. Like, you can't be a 3rd down back and not watch tape. If you can get away with it at any position, I would say running back is the spot. You can't at receiver. They disguise too many coverages. There's too many things that you have to, on the fly, adjust to. I'm not saying he doesn't. I caught up with him at the Super Bowl. I thought he was a great young man. Enjoyed our conversation. But a lot of people are questioning with Tedero McMillan, like, okay, what did you really have to do at Arizona? Did you get away with everything at Arizona? Were they trying to keep you happy so much that you didn't go in the portal that you didn't have to do the things that everybody else had to do?
A little. So you're saying there's stories floating around about that?
Your quarterback was your quarterback basically your entire life.
Yeah.
Right? And so, how much...
Did they play, before Arizona together? Okay.
Yes. How much of that was, y'all's rapport because you just literally played with each other all growing up in college?
True.
So there's a lot of questions. Do I think that Teterow is going to be a good player in the NFL? I still do, but I understand why there's some teams that are not in the top 10. We are not going to use a top 10 pick. And so...
Well, looks like me and Jacob landed pretty much on the same spot with Tet McMillan.
For the Saints, if Tyler Warren's there, how intriguing is that going to be to them? Could Matthew Golden from Texas dominated the college football playoff? Nobody could cover him. Is he going to find his way into the top 10? Is he different enough from the receivers that you have in Olave, Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks in his size?
That is a question. He is so similar size-wise. I don't know if it really matters. If you told me, hey, man, you can have 4 Puka Nakuras or Cooper Kupps or whoever, name your player. It's I'm not really overly concerned that they're not all different body types. Obviously you would want a little bit of everything, but I don't know if it's as bad as people make it out to be. So, I don't. I'm not saying I would take Matthew Golden at 9, but I wouldn't get so hung up on similar body types.
He's more in kind of their mold than Teterow McMillan. So,
I mean, if you were telling me I had a choice between the receivers, I still would probably go McMillan.
Yeah.
Because of that, because of the physical difference.
It sounds like Genty's going to go 6 overall to the Raiders.
He's going.
So that's starting to become more and more clear.
Their GM basically is
sure.
I can't come home to my son if we don't select him 6th overall.
So they let Josh Jacobs walk, and then they're maybe Genty ends up being better than Jacobs, but didn't Josh Jacobs lead the league in rushing?
And we had
and
another solid year this year.
Interesting.
Well, a lot of people were wondering, could they still go Shedeur because Geno only had 1 year left?
Then they extended Geno.
It's a $75 million extension yesterday.
Yeah, how about that?
I mean, they're not taking Shedeur Sanders.
Good for Geno. So again, at the end of this, I agree with Ross's original premise. I really just don't want a pass rusher.
I don't think you need. I think that would be a bad move for the Saints.
You don't need one that. That's the. I honestly at this point don't know how it's still a conversation. I mean, I don't know how. I think people are used to. It's the same with the offensive line. I've heard a lot of people say the Saints should draft nothing but offensive and defensive linemen. And it's well, where exactly are they going to play? Because they're not going to play center. They're not going to play left tackle. They're not going to play right guard. They're not going to play right tackle. So you really only need a left guard as far as true need. I'm not saying Trevor Penning's a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying Cesar Ruiz is a Hall of Famer. But as far as who is starting and what is a legitimate need, you're only really drafting a left guard. And then on the defensive line, you're only really drafting an interior defensive lineman. And who is probably going to rotate with Bryan Bresee. So I keep hearing edge, offensive line, tackle. But what is that line of play? And now I'm hearing safety. I've heard safety. We're good. One of the shows we watched, they were talking about drafting Malachi Starks because he's the heir apparent to Tyrann Mathieu. Brother, you don't draft a safety at 9th overall to be the heir apparent. When the hell have you ever heard of an heir apparent safety? That is crazy to me. When you have as big of holes as the Saints have in the running back room, in the wide receiver room, in the interior defensive line, and in the linebacker room. When you have holes that big and you're talking, let's just take the heir apparent to Tyrann. And even the defensive backs. You have right now Alontae Taylor, you got Kool-Aid McKinstry, you've got Isaac Yiadom. It's not exactly just this barren wasteland where you draft Will Johnson and all of a sudden, boom, he immediately slots in, or Jahdae Barron immediately slots in. If Jahdae Barron gets drafted, you got just a bunch of slot corners. You just got slot corners all over the place. And, like we talked about, in previous videos, cornerback's already kind of a weird position. You're not asking cornerbacks in 2025 to go be this dominant one-on-one, follow someone around the field. And you certainly don't do that in Brandon Staley's defense. Brandon Staley's defense is a zone heavy Vic Fangio, Nick Saban style of pattern matching zone is what he's going to ask these defenders to do. So, like the lockdown cornerback thing, first of all, it doesn't really exist anymore, and it's not going to exist in this defense. So, drafting a cornerback at 9, you kind of lose value. You could probably draft a cornerback later and get the exact same value out of them in this defense. That's how I see it. So if you do all that, you get basically down to like 3 different positions as far as like in this particular draft board at number 9.
Regardless of who it is.
I would keep the door cracked for Mason Graham. Like, I'm not going to close myself off completely.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Jake that it feels like this needs to be an offensive pick here and a difference maker, a skill position pick as well. We'll continue to break it down, though, as we get closer to the draft. Wow.
I think you're down to, let's take Genty off because I think he's going to go at 6. I think that is pretty much guaranteed. Mason Graham, Ted McMillan, Tyler Warren, Jihad Campbell, Jalen Walker, I think are your 5 guys. Did I miss anybody? I think are the 5 guys who it's like, okay, we want one of these 5 to be there. The next tier would be your Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson. Would be probably Will Campbell if he's still there, but you have some real, I don't know. Can he play guard? Like, I don't know if he can even get, I don't know. You have to, that's a question for the coaches. I don't want to speculate. Like, yeah, it would take Will Campbell and move him to guard. So, well, he can't even, 6'6", like he can't even get down to play guard. Like he's not comfortable doing that. So I don't even want to speculate that. But the next tier would be like your cornerbacks, your, I guess like Mike Greens of the world, and that's probably it for that next tier. Yeah, that's probably it. So. And then I got Shedeur Sanders would be in that second tier as well. If it just broke crazy, that's probably like if you, I know we're doing like a ton of draft stuff, but if you really zoned it in, I think those are your like 8 players that the Saints could draft and are looking to draft. All right, get on down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.